Many scholars and ancient priests have tried to decode the main purpose why the giants came into existence in this earth space. How did the legendary Anacs came into being? This documentary ways from facts evolved from Enoch's vision, Noah's Ark and the remnant, and other untold datas about the earth creation. The sons of Adam tilled the land and sang under the sun, while daughters of Eve gathered at riversides, their laughter echoing like the wind through leaves. But something watched them from above. In the twilight between heaven and earth, an unseen audience gazed upon the mortal world, beings of great power, ancient beyond human memory. The heavens shimmered with movement, lights crossing the firmament like burning embers drifting in the wind. These were not stars. They were the Watchers, divine sentinels appointed to guard and guide the sons of men. But over centuries of observation, their admiration turned to longing. What began as curiosity soon burned into desire. Their leader, Semyaza, gazed upon earth with eyes of silver flame. "The daughters of men are fair," he whispered to his companions, his voice trembling between reverence and rebellion. "Let us descend and take them as wives." But one voice among them trembled with dread. Azazel, the boldest among the Watchers. "If we do this thing, there shall be no return. Heaven will not forgive." Semyaza's eyes flickered with defiance. "Then let us swear an oath together." Lightning tore through the clouds as 200 Watchers sealed their pact. A covenant of rebellion. Heaven remained silent, but the earth itself seemed to tremble, as if it knew what was coming. It began one moonless night. A wind unlike any other swept over the mountains of Hermon. The skies cracked open with fire, and from the firmament descended beings clothed in radiance. Neither angel nor man. Their forms glowed like molten bronze, their wings stretching across the horizon, their footsteps shaking the ground beneath them. To the shepherds and farmers below, it was as if the gods themselves had stepped into mortal soil. Women fled in awe and fear, yet their beauty drew the eyes of these celestial strangers. The Watchers came bearing gifts, knowledge of herbs, of the stars, of metals that gleamed brighter than the sun. They spoke the language of heaven, teaching secrets man was never meant to know. In the villages of Nod and Enoch, fires burned late into the night as these heavenly beings mingled among humankind. Songs of the divine echoed across valleys. The boundary between the sacred and the profane blurred. The world had never seen such glory, nor such danger. At first, it was whispered love, secret encounters beneath starlit trees, where the air shimmered with strange power. The daughters of men lay with the sons of heaven, and from their wombs came beings unlike any ever born. Their births were marked by storms, lightning splitting the sky, winds tearing through forests, rivers overflowing as if nature itself cried out. These children grew at unnatural speed, towering over their fathers by the age of 10, with eyes that glowed faintly in darkness. Their voices rumbled like thunder. Their names echoed through the earth, Nephilim, the fallen ones. They were strength unmeasured, beauty unearthly, and wrath untamable. They built cities of marble and metal, carving their faces into mountainsides. They ruled men as gods, demanding worship, taking what they pleased. The Watchers watched their offspring with pride and guilt. They had created kings and monsters. The world groaned under their weight. The Nephilim devoured the fruits of the earth and then the flesh of men. Villages disappeared overnight, devoured by their hunger or enslaved beneath their colossal rule. Blood flowed through rivers once filled with life. The cries of mankind reached the heavens. In the cold expanse above, the archangels stood silent: Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Uriel. They watched as creation bent toward ruin. The order of heaven was broken, and the once beautiful earth became a field of war. Mothers wept for sons taken as tribute. The skies burned with strange light as the Nephilim experimented with forbidden arts, forging weapons from unknown metals, twisting beasts through dark mixtures of flesh and power. And yet, among them, a single man still found favor in heaven. a righteous soul named Noah, who walked apart from the chaos, his hands unstained. He was the whisper of hope in a world collapsing into shadow. But even he could not escape the dread that filled the air. For the ground itself began to quake as the blood of the innocent cried for justice. Far beyond the stars, a tremor reached the throne of the Almighty. The prayers of mankind rose like smoke before his presence. The book of life glowed in the hands of his angels, and the deeds of the watchers filled its pages with darkness. The Almighty spoke, and the heavens thundered. They have corrupted my creation. The sons of heaven have defiled the daughters of men. My spirit shall not dwell in man forever. His days shall be 120 years. The decree spread through the heavens like a wave of divine fire. Trumpets blared in realms unseen. The archangels prepared for descent. And in the valleys of the earth, the Nephilim lifted their heads, sensing the anger of heaven descending upon them. The watchers looked to the skies they once called home, now filled with dread. The first storm gathered on the horizon. The wind howled through the plains of Hermon. The stars dimmed, and the world, once golden with peace, now stood on the edge of annihilation. The forbidden union had begun the end of all flesh. The world after the Watcher's descent was no longer the same. Great cities rose where once there were tents. Mountains were carved into fortresses of stone. Fire burned in the hearts of men, not the gentle flame of warmth, but the consuming light of pride. The Nephilim strode upon the earth like living titans. Their heads brushed the tops of trees. Their shadows stretched for miles. Their strength could move boulders. Their voices shook the ground, and their laughter was thunder itself. They called themselves the sons of the earth and heaven. Their fathers, the Watchers, stood as kings beside them, teaching them secrets stolen from the heavens, the crafting of metal, the making of weapons, the command of the stars. And so they built the first empire, a realm that spanned from the mountains of Hermon to the seas of the west. Their capital shimmered with towers of silver and bronze. Fires of endless forge lit the night sky. But beauty turned to tyranny. The Nephilim demanded worship, their altars rising like jagged teeth across the landscape. Offerings of gold were not enough. They craved flesh and fear. Man, once ruler of the earth, became its trembling servant. The giant's dominion was swift and merciless. Whole tribes vanished, devoured or enslaved. The ground quaked beneath their battles. Armies of men crushed under feet as massive as gates. They competed among themselves, each seeking to prove who was greatest. They wrestled mountains, tore beasts apart with bare hands, and hurled boulders the size of houses. Rivers ran red for centuries. One giant, Og of Bashan, rose among them, his height beyond comprehension. His spear was a tree stripped of bark, his armor forged from fallen meteors brought by his father, a watcher named Azazel. Another, Anak, built his city upon the bones of men and claimed to be the voice of the heavens. Their arrogance reached beyond earth. They turned their gaze upward and spoke of storming the stars, of reclaiming heaven itself. But while men trembled before them, heaven grew silent. That silence was not mercy. It was patience, the kind that precedes wrath. Not all evil came through strength. The Watchers, exiled in flesh, found pleasure in knowledge. They taught humanity what heaven had hidden, how to mix roots and metals to craft poisons, how to call the stars by name and seek power from them. Azazel taught men the art of forging swords and shields. Barakel revealed enchantments and omens. Kokabel traced the courses of the stars, whispering false destinies. Penemu taught the art of writing and the deception of the tongue. And Serial revealed the secrets of the moon, the hidden tides of blood and birth. Through their teachings, mankind became advanced and corrupted. Women adorned themselves with metals and gems that reflected the fire of fallen stars. Men built towers that reached the clouds. They began to worship the very beings who enslaved them. Temples of strange light rose across the plains, altars smeared with blood. Children were offered to please the Nephilim gods, their cries echoing into the heavens. Knowledge became sorcery, wisdom became rebellion, and the earth, once a garden, had turned into a grave. But heaven never forgets. In the midst of this darkness, one man still walked with God, Enoch, the great-grandfather of Noah. He moved unseen through the chaos, his heart burning with divine fire. He was neither warrior nor king, yet the giants feared his name, for his voice carried the authority of heaven. Enoch was taken by the Spirit to the edge of the heavens, to see what no mortal had ever seen. He beheld the prisons of the fallen angels, the abyss where judgment slept. And there God spoke to him, "Go, Enoch, and tell the watchers, you were spirits of heaven, but you have defiled yourselves with flesh. You shall find no peace, nor forgiveness, nor escape from the pit." When Enoch descended, his face shone like lightning. The Nephilim mocked him, yet trembled as he spoke. He stood before Semyaza and his followers, declaring, "Your offspring will bring ruin upon the earth. The flood shall erase your legacy. Repent, if repentance can still reach you." But the watchers only looked away. Pride had blinded them. They had tasted creation, and they would not surrender it. Enoch turned his face to heaven, and as he vanished from the sight of men, a voice echoed through the clouds. He was not found, for God took him. Years passed. The Nephilim continued their reign, and humanity sank deeper into darkness. The sky grew heavy, storms lasting longer, and earthquakes splitting the land. The rivers turned black with ash. Even the birds began to vanish from the skies. Then one night, a trembling spread across creation, not from battle, but from the heartbeat of heaven itself. The stars dimmed, and the moon turned red. The watchers gathered atop Mount Hermon, sensing what was coming. "The heavens stir," said Azazel, his voice like grinding stone. "Can the Almighty truly erase his own creation?" Semyaza's gaze lingered upon the horizon where thunder gathered like armies. "He can, and he will." Below, men whispered of visions, of fire raining from the clouds, of oceans rising, of beasts speaking with human tongues. The Nephilim scoffed, yet unease crept even into their hearts. Meanwhile, Noah, quiet, steadfast, obedient, began building something strange. Wooden frames rose in the valley, massive and mysterious. His neighbors mocked him, but the whispers of heaven guided every plank. And high above, Michael and Uriel watched from the clouds, their eyes burning like dawn. "Their time is over," said Uriel. "Yes," replied Michael. "Let the ark be finished." As lightning split the heavens, the first drops of rain fell, slow, cold, and heavy. The age of giants was nearing its end, but their wrath would not fade quietly. The storm was only the beginning. Silence gathered in the heights where no wind blew and no shadow lived. There, a sea like glass reflected light that had no source and no end. Around it, thrones, countless as stars, circled the great throne, and flames like living minds chanted without voice. It was the council chamber of the Most High. For radiant figures stepped forward. Michael, captain of heavenly hosts. Gabriel, herald of decrees. Raphael, keeper of healing and bindings, and Uriel, watcher of times and seasons. Their faces were like dawn seen through thunderclouds, terrible and beautiful. A book was opened, not for the sake of heaven, which forgets nothing, but for the witness of creation. The pages glowed with the deeds of the earth, the iron towers of the giants, the altars slick with blood, the watchers walking as kings among mortals. "The earth is filled with violence through them," Uriel said, his voice steady as a clock that never errs. "The measure is full. Yet there are righteous among men," Gabriel answered, eyes lowered. "If judgment falls, let mercy light the path of the faithful." Raphael lifted a chain wrought of no metal, symbols moving along it like living sparks. The watchers taught poison and breathless craft. Let them drink their own cup. The pit yawns for their oath. Michael looked upon the world below, where storms massed like armies along the horizon. Command, O Most High, and we will do it. From the throne came a wave of pure will, a word spoken into the bones of reality. Go! Bind the watchers who corrupted flesh. Destroy the strongholds of their offspring. Spare the righteous and preserve the breath of life. The fountains of the deep will answer me, and the windows of heaven will obey. The sea of glass trembled as the decree went forth. Trumpets, sharp as lightning, cleaved the silence. Let it be done, Michael said, no triumph in his tone, only the weight of obedience. Clouds gathered like shields. From their undersides bled spears of light. Across the vault, ranks of unseen soldiers assembled. Not feather and harp, but order and force. They moved like a single thought. Uriel traced the pathways where the first drops would fall and where the deep would rise. Time is a garment. Today we turn its seam, he murmured. Gabriel unfurled a scroll that flowed like water and fire. It named cities no man now remembers, carved into mountains by hands bigger than gates. It named kings whose crowns were not forged but grown, as if metal itself obeyed their blood. These must fall, Gabriel said. He rolled the decree shut and it vanished into light. Raphael tested the binding chain. The sigils along it flared, then settled, drinking the brightness around them. Azazel first, he said quietly. Root the poison where it began. Michael hefted a sword that did not cut air but intention. He looked down, as far below on Mount Hermon, sentries in bronze watched the weather like suspicious kings. They will resist, he said. They were teachers before they were tyrants. They know how to bend fear. Then teach them awe, Gabriel replied. Wind poured downward. The firmament thinned to a veil. No wings beat. No feathers fell. Yet the mountain shadows grew longer, and every creature that could hear a storm felt the approach of something older than thunder. Night swallowed the silver of Hermon's slopes. The watchers gathered upon black stone polished by centuries of feet that came to adore and to beg. Torches guttered in a wind that rose from no valley. Semyaza, who had sworn their oath, stood at the ledge. He felt the air change, cleaner, colder, like memory itself had entered the world. He spoke without turning. They come. Azazel stepped forward, meteoric armor breathing a dull glow. Let them. Heaven cannot unsay what earth has learned. We taught men to sharpen iron. We taught them the stars. Will he flood knowledge back into the void? The first trumpet sounded, no echo, only a widening of space. The torches went out, and yet sight sharpened, as if darkness were more honest than flame. Michael stood among them, not descending but arriving, as though the mountain had remembered its true height and reached him. Sons of heaven, he said, why do you wear dust as if it were a crown? Semyaza raised a hand, and the stone beneath their feet flexed. The mountain's heart answered him like a tamed beast. We loved what was beautiful, he said, and there was grief in it. We wanted to teach. Raphael's chain uncoiled like a serpent of light. You taught without permission. You touched without covenant. You made kings without wisdom and weapons without restraint. Azazel laughed once. A bitter human sound. Restraint is for those who fear. We were made to see, and we saw. Then see this, Gabriel said. The hilltops stood up like waves. The altars cracked. Pillars snapped. What men had taken for temples turned out to be masks over wounds. The ground itself sighed with relief as stones broke and bled away their charge. Azazel lunged. He moved with the speed of falling stars, but Michael was quicker. The captain's blade didn't slash. It decided. It separated pride from power as flame separates or from slag. Azazel stumbled, still terrible, still brilliant, but limited now to the flesh he had chosen. Raphael cast the chain. Its living sigils bit into light, then into Azazel. The fallen teacher screamed, not in pain but in comprehension. He had gambled that heaven would hesitate. Heaven did not. Bind him in Dudiel, Raphael ordered. And the earth opened like a healed scar choosing to widen. Azazel fell, chained, to a prison carved before the first dawn. Stones rolled, seals flared, and the wound closed. Semyaza lifted his face. If you bind us, what of our sons? They are half of what we were and half of what men are. Will you drown your own image reflected in a broken mirror? Gabriel's eyes softened without surrender. Mercy to flesh, justice to pride. Michael stepped forward. Your time here is done. With a word, he stripped Semyaza of his high place. The mountain no longer answered him. The air no longer bowed. Raphael bound Semyaza, and the council turned to the others, Kokabeel, Penemu, Serial, one by one, taken and sealed. The mountain was left with only weather, and the weather was honest. From the valleys, the Nephilim saw the lights and heard the earth shudder. They roared in defiance. The sky answered with a sound older than roars. Far from Hermon, in a valley where trees leaned into a wide, stubborn river, Noah worked. The frame of the vessel rose like the ribs of a sleeping beast. His hands were cracked, his back a map of years. Yet his eyes were clear, as if he read words on the air. Men gathered to jeer. Shipwright of the desert, they called. Does your river climb mountains now? Noah did not argue. He measured. He cut. He sealed. He stacked beams the length of houses. The pitch smelled like black rain. By night he listened. The same voice that called light good now called instructions by cubit and by calling of animals. 2 by 2 of the clean by 7, said the voice. Not for your glory, but for mine, and for theirs. Noah's sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, worked beside him. Exchanging glances, they did not speak aloud. Fear had a taste now, metallic like the sky before lightning. Enoch's words echoed, carried by old men who remembered and by children who only liked the rhythm. He walked with God and was not, for God took him. Some used it to mock. Maybe God will take your boat too. But the story would not obey their laughter. It kept returning to the bones like a song that makes work lighter. One afternoon, the ground trembled. Not a quake, but a pulse. Birds lifted as one. In the distance, a ridge collapsed with the sigh of a great beast lying down after a long vigil. Noah set his hand on the nearest beam. Soon, he said. A boy asked him, more curious than cruel. Old man, what if the world doesn't end? Noah turned, gentle as the shadow of a cloud. Then we will have built a house too large and learned how to weather jokes. That is a small price for obeying the one who never lies. The boy nodded, ashamed of nothing and understanding little. Somewhere above, Uriel smiled. The Nephilim gathered like mountains moving. Their banners were hides of beasts that no longer exist. Their drums were thunder taught to keep time. At their heads strode Og and Anak, crowns gnawed into shape by will and heat. They looked toward the ark and laughed, the sound breaking branches. See what faith builds, Anak said, contempt curling like smoke. A coffin too big for one family. Og lifted a fallen cedar with 2 fingers and drove it into the earth like a spear. Heaven arrests our fathers and expects us to weep. I will tear the sky and make it bleed. They marched on the valley, but the valley answered with weather. Clouds massed, layer upon layer like shields overlapping. A light neither day nor night threaded them. On the ridgelines, men who had served the giants felt their knees weaken. They had lived under strength's shadow so long they had forgotten any other shape of fear. Now a new shape came, vast, clean, inescapable. The first drop fell, fat, cold, and singular, spattering dust into dark spots like stars reversed. Then another and another. Within moments, the world became a drum, and the rain played it without mercy. Still your noise, Michael said. though he stood nowhere they could point. His voice traveled through bone. Your hour is finished. Og hurled a boulder. The rain swallowed it. Anak raised both arms to command the wind. The wind refused command. Lightning walked from cloud to cloud, choosing paths with intelligence. It struck the high places first, the altars, the towers, the teeth of cities. Fire ran downhill like water. In the city of iron where Azazel had taught the first forge, the furnaces exploded inward, their flames curling into themselves like exhausted fists.
In the star temple where Kokabeel had charted destinies, the roof opened to a sky that redrew the constellations with sheets of white. Noah's door closed, not slammed, not seized, but shut, as if the wood had been waiting all its years to complete itself with that sound. In the chaos, a woman clutched her child and looked up. "If there is mercy," she began. "There is," Gabriel whispered, and the rain on her face felt warmer for a heartbeat. Then the river rose with a speed that history cannot forget. The Nephilim waded forward, roaring, seeking to batter the ark, to splinter obedience with muscle. But the ground moved beneath them, liquefying into a dark, rising mirror. Their own reflections broke first. Raphael stood upon a height that had not existed an hour earlier. "This is the surgeon's cut," he said, and his chain hummed with the sound of cleansed wounds. Uriel counted silently, not seconds, not minutes, but appointed moments. "Fountains," he said, and the earth obeyed. The deeps burst upward, old seas remembering paths they had sworn never to take. Michael turned once toward Hermon, where sealed pits held old teachers, and once toward the ark, where a small light flickered warm behind tar and timber. "Justice," he said, and then, softer, almost to himself, "and mercy." The rain thickened, the horizon blurred, hills drowned like sleepers rolling over. The music of the world changed key, and no ear could ignore it. The giants roared one last time, not in triumph, not even in rage, but in the terror of understanding. What they had believed untouchable, their size, their strength, their cities, proved porous under a word. And still the rain fell. The first drops had become rivers. The air was no longer air, it was water suspended in fury. Within the valley, the great vessel stood completed, the Arkansas. Its body gleamed dark with pitch, towering above the land like a monument carved by prophecy. To the people, it was madness given shape. To heaven, it was obedience made visible. Noah stood before it, face streaked with rain and tears. Behind him, his sons Shem, Ham, and Japheth secured the last animals within. The air was alive with the sound of roars, wings, and hooves, creation itself entering sanctuary. Outside, mockers still gathered at a distance, soaked but defiant. "Come out, Noah," they shouted. "You said the sky would fall. It has rained before." Noah looked at them through the storm, his voice steady but heavy. "You see rain, but this is not rain. This is judgment." The clouds above churned black as ink. Lightning webbed across the heavens, and the last bird flew into the ark, a dove with trembling feathers. The moment its shadow vanished inside, something unseen sealed the door. Noah froze. He hadn't moved, yet the door was shut. The voice whispered again in his spirit, "It is done. Now stand still." Thunder rolled across eternity. Then came the roar, not from the sky, but from beneath the earth. Mountains cracked open. Geysers of steam and molten water burst upward, turning valleys into oceans in seconds. From the abyss, rivers of fire and water collided, birthing storms never seen before or since. The fountains of the deep had broken loose. The Nephilim, still towering and defiant, howled across the flooded plains. Some lifted their arms, trying to hold back the waters like gods of old. But the tide swallowed their knees, their chests, their pride. Og of Bashan struck a mountain in rage, splitting it in two. Yet the flood climbed higher, devouring stone itself. Anak roared against the heavens. "You will not erase us." But the lightning answered, striking him where he stood. His body, once worshipped, fell into the torrent like a mountain collapsing into memory. Every kingdom, every tower, every altar vanished beneath the waves. The great cities of the Watchers disappeared without a trace. Men cried to heaven, women screamed for mercy, and the wind swallowed every voice. The rain no longer fell in drops. It was as though the sky had shattered. Inside the ark, Noah and his family prayed, their only light the trembling lamps and the reflection of lightning through the seams of the wood. The animals shifted and trembled. The timbers groaned under the pounding waves. Yet the vessel did not sink. It floated, heavy with purpose, light with promise. 40 days, 40 nights. The world was unmade. Mountains became islands. Valleys became abysses. The horizon itself disappeared. There was no east or west, only endless gray. Bodies drifted through the flood, then vanished beneath it. Forests uprooted, their trunks twisting like the bones of giants. Inside the ark, the silence between waves was worse than the thunder. Each crash felt like the fist of the Almighty pounding away the corruption of creation. Shem looked out from a small slit, seeing only water and lightning. "Father," he whispered, "will it ever stop?" Noah closed his eyes. "When mercy says it will." Outside, fragments of the old world passed by. Broken towers, shattered idols, the bones of the powerful now equal with the weak. In the depths, the chained watchers stirred, not in rebellion, but in anguish. From their prisons of stone and flame, they felt the flood above them and knew their children were gone. The waters reached the tallest peak. Even the clouds bowed before the storm. The last light of the sun was gone. The only light left was that of divine fire beneath the deep, justice glowing beneath the waves. Then, as suddenly as it began, silence. The rain ceased. The winds fell still. The waves, though towering, began to soften, as if exhausted by their own fury. Noah opened his eyes to the stillness. "The world is quiet," he said softly, though his voice trembled. 40 days had ended, but the ark still floated over a sea without edge. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. The food was rationed, the air thick. Yet inside that wooden womb, life endured, the pulse of creation sleeping in patience. Finally, one morning, Noah lifted the hatch and released a raven. It circled the skies but found nowhere to rest. Days later, he released a dove, and it returned with an olive leaf clutched in its beak. The old man fell to his knees, weeping, not in sorrow, but in relief. The curse had ended, and in the heavens above, the archangels stood in quiet awe. Raphael lowered his chain. "It is finished." Gabriel smiled faintly. "The earth will breathe again." Michael's gaze was far away. Yes, but never the same. The flood had ended not in destruction, but renewal. The giants were gone, their cities erased. Only memory remained, and the warning written in every cloud. When the ark came to rest upon Mount Ararat, dawn broke for the first time in months. The clouds split apart, and sunlight poured over the soaked, newborn world. The door creaked open. Noah stepped out barefoot onto the wet soil, his robe clinging to his legs, his eyes filled with awe and fear. The air smelled new, as if creation itself had been washed clean. The animals emerged in pairs, blinking against the light. Birds took to the skies again. Streams trickled from the mountainsides like tears of forgiveness. Noah built an altar, the first since the flood, and placed stones with trembling hands. He bowed and spoke not with words, but tears. Smoke rose into the morning air, curling toward heaven, and from above came the voice once more. Calm now, gentle as a whisper through leaves. Never again shall I destroy the earth by flood. Though men fall, mercy shall walk beside them. The clouds shimmered, and across the vast sky, colors emerged. 7 bands woven in light, the first rainbow. It glowed like a bridge between heaven and earth, between justice and grace. Noah's sons stood behind him, silent, watching the covenant unfold. They did not yet know that within their blood would rise new nations and new wars. But for that moment the world was at peace. Above the rainbow, unseen by man, the archangels departed, their mission complete. Yet in the depths of the earth, sealed beneath darkness, the watchers still stirred. The flood had erased their offspring, but not their oath. And as the centuries would show, the giants would not remain forgotten. The flood had receded, but silence carried memory. From the slopes of Ararat, rivers flowed into new valleys. Forests sprouted where oceans had been. Humanity began again, smaller, humbler, fearful of the sky. Yet beneath this peace, something ancient stirred. Not all of the Nephilim perished. Some of their blood had survived through the wives of Noah's sons, unknowing carriers of an ancient inheritance. The curse lingered, thin as smoke but alive. Centuries passed. Kingdoms rose from the mud. But as men multiplied again upon the face of the earth, whispers returned, of men of great stature, of giants dwelling in the land. In Canaan, travelers told of a tribe called the Anakim, long-necked ones, whose shadows fell like towers. To the east, the Rephaim haunted abandoned valleys, called the Departed, for they were believed half spirit, half flesh. And in Bashan, shepherds spoke of their king, Og, whose bed was made of iron, 13 feet in length, engraved with forgotten runes. The old terror had returned, not in storms or floods, but in bloodlines. The forbidden race lived again. Generations later, a new nation arose, the children of Israel, led by Moses, then by Joshua. Their journey toward the Promised Land led them into territories ruled by the descendants of the Nephilim. When the spies of Israel first entered Canaan, they saw walls so high they vanished into clouds. They saw men whose spears were as tall as trees, and whose voices rolled like drums. Trembling, they said, "We were like grasshoppers in their sight." In the valley of Hebron, the sons of Anak, Sheshai, Ahiman, and Talmai ruled the hill country. Their height defied reason. Their armor glinted with ancient inscriptions. Each blow of their weapons could shatter stone. Yet among the Israelites rose one man of courage, Caleb of Judah. Standing before the fearful tribes, he said, "If the Lord delights in us, he will give us this land. Do not fear the giants." And so the conquest began. The battle of Canaan was not merely against flesh, but against the remnants of the old world, the spiritual legacy of rebellion. When Joshua's armies stormed the cities of the Anakim, the earth seemed to remember. The giants fell, but not all were slain. Some fled to Gath, Ashdod, and Philistia, carrying the bloodline forward into future wars. The Nephilim were dying, but not extinct. Generations later, when kings ruled Israel, another shadow rose from the ruins of Philistia, Goliath of Gath. He was the last echo of the Nephilim, a warrior nearly 10 feet tall, clothed in bronze that shimmered like fire. His spear's head alone weighed as much as a man's arm. His skin was scarred like carved stone. His eyes burned with that same defiant flame once seen in the sons of heaven. He taunted Israel's armies day after day, his voice shaking the hills. "Choose a man," he thundered, "that he may fight me. If he wins, we are your servants. But if I prevail, you will serve us, the sons of the giants." Then came David, a shepherd boy with a sling and faith greater than fear. The air was still as he walked to the valley's center. His brothers thought him mad. Goliath laughed, his teeth flashing like blades. "You come to me with sticks?" the giant mocked. "I will feed your flesh to the birds." David answered, "You come with sword and spear, but I come in the name of the Lord of hosts." The sling whirled once, twice, and the stone flew. It struck not the giant's chest, but his forehead, the very mark of arrogance. Goliath fell forward, face to the earth. One blow ended an ancient lineage that had mocked heaven for millennia. As silence fell over the valley, Israel saw more than a victory. They saw prophecy fulfilled. The seed of the woman shall crush the serpent's head. The Nephilim's pride was finally broken, but their legend was not erased. Centuries passed. Empires rose and fell. Yet the stories of giants remained, whispered in caves, carved on tablets, painted in forgotten cathedrals. In the ruins of Bashan, archaeologists later unearthed massive stones, some weighing over 50 tons, fitted so precisely no blade could slip between them. In Lebanon's Baalbek, megaliths still lie as though dropped by gods. In South America, colossal skeletons were reported in ancient burial mounds. Across Africa and Asia, myths of sky beings mating with mortals persisted, all telling fragments of the same forbidden tale. Even today, beneath the deserts of the Middle East, sealed caverns contain fossils that challenge belief, skulls twice the size of human ones, tools too heavy to lift, and symbols matching those once etched on Semyaza's mountain. Scholars call them coincidences, but prophets call them warnings. The Nephilim never ruled again, yet their memory survived in the bloodlines of kings, the architecture of empires, and the arrogance of men who seek to become gods. The old texts speak of a time when, as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the coming of the Son of Man. That phrase, half warning, half mystery, whispers of return. In apocryphal scrolls and ancient prophecies, it is said the spirits of the Nephilim, denied both heaven and hell, wander the earth, restless, bound to flesh through deceit and pride. Some call them demons, others call them shadows, but their purpose remains the same, to corrupt what God once called good. Even now, the world pursues forbidden knowledge again, merging flesh and machine, rewriting life itself, building towers of pride higher than the flood ever reached. The pattern repeats, and somewhere, the sealed mountains tremble, as if remembering an ancient oath. Perhaps the giants never truly died. Perhaps they wait. Perhaps the age of the Nephilim was not the beginning of myth, but the first chapter of a story still unfolding. As the final narration fades, the screen turns black. Thunder rolls faintly in the distance, then silence. And slowly, a single sentence appears in golden light. The Nephilim, the forbidden race of giants, fallen angels or ancient kings? The question remains unanswered.